Okay, so sorry, missed some of the recording people, but I'm not going back over that. We have some scribes. Okay, yeah, so let's try Jitsi next time. I'll update the calendar invite. If it doesn't work, we'll come back to Zoom. Action item review. There's still a bunch of undone action items here. I will start pinging people about these next time. I forgot to do that this time. But if you have items, check them off. DREF patterns. So one of the things, this is a pending MCP, and Josh and I reviewed, there's a proposed charter, and Josh and I reviewed it, and I wanted to talk about it and what we think about going forward, because so basically the idea is to to have DREF patterns in some way, whether that be syntax or like a DREF space P pattern like this, or whether that be something else that would use the DREF trait and support kind of pattern matching on the insides of a pointer. And I really want this. I think it would be really useful, but it is a little bit tricky because DREF pure, or because that runs user code, and our exhaustiveness checks sometimes rely on the fact that that values haven't changed while we're doing the matching. And I think it might, trying to remember now. Well, for example, a very simple thing would be that the DREF might just yield different values every time you called it in principle, or like cycle through a variety of values, in which case, if you tested it once and found that you had a reference to an option that was none, you might the next time get an option that is some, and that could confuse and create UB. So it seems to imply some kind of unsafe trait. And I'm a little bit, there's a lot of use cases for this. I'm a little bit wary about opening that door right now without, like, it just seems like a design item that we want to take care with. Not to mention that there seems like a lot of syntax. On the other hand, I think this seems like a cool feature and we do kind of need it. So I wanted to know what people felt about trying to explore this as a real project. I mean, another option would be to encourage people to do it. I don't know what exactly, in a branch, or that doesn't seem very good. Maybe with procedural macros somehow.
I assume that we know enough or suspect enough that like just having the exhaustive checker treat something that actually goes through the path of a DREF would be considered this path, this arm may or may not be taken, and just forcing
an underscore basically.
Yeah, I imagine it would suck, but I just wanted to check whether.
Yeah, I didn't actually consider it, but it just seems so annoying that.
I also think
it probably depends what you're matching against. If it's something like a string and you're trying to match a string literal, you're never getting exhaustiveness anyway.
I mean, and if let also, like, that's going to be fine in that context.
Yeah, I'm not sure it actually solves the problem though, because you still need to like code gen so that fall through doesn't, like, if you match and then you're trying to pull out the pointer or whatever, and then it doesn't end up being what you expected. I don't know. I would be worried about just saying that the underscore solves things. I think that's not obvious to me.
Okay, I was.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. I was just going to say, it sounds like there's maybe I didn't appreciate the distinct issues then in terms of like exhaustiveness analysis versus code gen correctness.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I personally think that this is also something I really want, but it also seems like a big can of worms, and I would personally hesitate to commit to it given at least current line team bandwidth.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I'm wondering if there's some way to, I mean, is there really, what experimentation do we even really need though that's not like just doing it?
Yeah, I guess one thing that I might suggest, and I don't know whether this is actually helpful, but if people are really interested in doing work that's not on the lane team, one thing that would be really useful, I think, is going out and looking at prior art, both in the ecosystem, because there's DREF pure, and that probably won't change too much over time in terms of what's possible. So I would sort of expect that a proposal or lane team note or whatever we call them. Basically laying out that prior art would be useful for the future when we do decide to dig in.
I know this is opening a can of worms, but we also have that whole static string to string, or static string slice to string conversion thing around deref mute that people have a lot of feelings about, but this is potentially, a case where you would want the deref pure thing in there. I don't have a conclusion to that thought other than that there's a conflict there and that it should be noted.
You mean the fact that we had talking about how we had at some point considered making string be like a zero length, like a static string with
string. Yeah.
Yes, I remember this. But
So
then we had the concern that if you had to deref mute, it would have to allocate lazily, kind of.
Correct, and just calling deref mute in general on string is not super useful because there aren't a lot of mute APIs on stir because it's Unicode rather than bytes. But
right, there are some. Yeah.
This might be a weird, a weird thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely use cases for. It's not just maliciousness to do.
Maybe more specifically, that could guide, if we wanted to still do something like that, that could guide us towards a deref pure on a per deref trait basis. So for example, you could be deref pure in your deref impl, but not in your deref mute impl. I feel like people are already shaking their fists at me, but my point was basically just that there's a design space there to be considered.
I assume there must be some weird complication with deref move here as well, right? Does it even make sense for deref move to eventually be talked about as being pure?
Well, if we had it, I would like to be able to use it in patterns.
Yeah, I thought that was the idea, was that you wanted a deref mute pattern, but the deref mute itself, and if it was deref mute pure, however, would not actually be mutating the object. It would just be returning a mutable reference to a consistent sub portion of the object, right?
Right. I mean, I was thinking deref move, like for boxes.
Right.
And whether we can even match on something after a move and then decide that that wasn't okay, or what that even means.
Yeah, you can do that.
We already have to do that. Yeah, we already support that on boxes today.
I mean, basically, you can think of the match as applying a bunch of tests. And then if those all succeed, it kind of has pointers into the thing that was matched, and then it moves out the values, right? So you might like fail and you might have multiple patterns. I'm
trying to figure out how we could even run a deref move that moves something and then undo it.
Deref, we don't have a deref move, but
thing.
Deref move would actually return a raw. I mean, we can see how it works, but probably it's going to return a raw pointer.
Yeah.
And so that's how it would work, basically.
There would be a raw pointer API, and then there would be some sort of API to like destroy the object post removal or something like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, like a shallow free kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But either way, we need a two-pass system of some sort in terms of doing the checking that the thing is, satisfies the match before you do the move, no matter what. So.
Right, but you have a raw pointer, so
pure.
The first pass. I mean, maybe I'm confusing.
No, I'm picturing something in my head that might be different from what you're picturing. Like it sounds like you're picturing something where you'd have a single API that can handle both passes in terms of the initial.
It would give you a raw pointer, and that has to be pure, like producing the raw pointer. You can't produce different raw pointers, but after you get one, it wouldn't change or whatever.
Right. I'm imagining you don't have to necessarily do it that way, because you could imagine something that does the first pass uses one trait and another pass uses a different trait, but that's probably got its own huge bucket of worms. Yes. Why would you? Well, because you don't want to use raw pointers, maybe.
You have to for other reasons anyway. Anyway, it's okay. We don't have to dig into deref move, but
can I make a controversial proposal that this seems complicated and that we should not spend bunch more lengthy bandwidth on this.
I think we should move on. I was going to say the same. It seems clear that, I guess, is anyone prepared to say they want to champion and move this forward, or is there general agreement that it seems a little too complicated for us to embark on right now? I like Mark's suggestion of maybe people can invest some energy in summarizing the DREF pure and move situation, and that would help us move forward later. But
I think that, so I would agree with that, that summarizing the current state and finding cases where people want to use this would be a useful use of time. I also would love to see some analysis of whether there's value in having this if you can't have exhaustiveness checking. So for example, would people be happy with this if you always had to have an underscore pattern, at least for now, and in the future we might do better?
okay,
Because
yeah,
again, in the string case, that may be good enough. In some other cases, that may be good enough.
I'd be okay with that. And actually, as I think about it, although I sort of poo-pooed Felix's initial question in that direction, it occurs to me that a lot of cases are like a struct, right? Some kind of what you want to match and extract is going to be infallible anyway.
Right. And if that turns out to be useful, then I could imagine us having the bandwidth to support a non-exhaustive version fairly easily, because that sidesteps the primary complexity here. And then we would just need the design to be complete enough that it allows for the possibility of introducing exhaustiveness in the future, by way of either an unsafe trait or some especially clever type magic or whatever someone comes up with. So I think
Sure.
a survey of usage, and specifically with an eye towards would a non-exhaustive checking version be useful, and then depending on that, we can decide how much bandwidth this would take and whether we're prepared to support it on what timeline.
Okay, here's what I would recommend then. I think that's a good idea. I think I would like to have them prepare a float on internals, try to collect what are the objections to doing a version where we don't have DREF pure, and like, are there doors that we're closing? I don't think so, but is there some reason that we put ourselves in a worse position in the future? That's the question I would like to know. I can't think what it is, but does that make sense?
A version that doesn't rely on having DREF pure, that's what you're saying you want them to?
I'm saying I'd like to know,
document?
I'd like to float out and see if we had a version that didn't have DREF pure, does that then become backwards incompatible with later adding DREF pure in some way, or does that make our position materially worse in some other way?
I see.
Because it is going to be running user-defined code in the middle of pattern matching. Maybe there's some other interaction we're not considering, which until now, I mean, we sort of avoided, like for partial EQ, for example, right?
Right. Okay, I get it now.
Another interesting possibility would be if we say we can do exhaustiveness if and only if you order your clauses such that you only need one DREF for the entire match. And then in the future, if we want to support out of order clauses and still do exhaustiveness, then you'd need some sort of pure DREF, but we could potentially say, hey, if you put them all together and we can do one DREF, then we can do exhaustiveness. Limitations would not necessarily kill this.
Yeah, it's irrefutable. Okay, does anyone object to asking for that exploration? That seems pretty harmless. We're not committing one way or the other. I say we move on.
We should assign someone to write up a comment telling
Yeah,
them.
that's a good point. Scott, you're the liaison as I understand it. Will you write up a comment?
Sure.
Okay. And I mean, if I'm wrong about you being the liaison, that's good to know too, because that was something I wanted to say is I do want someone to be on this.
I feel a little bad about saying, please write a charter, and then saying, please don't, we're not going to charter it right now, but oh well.
That's not quite what we're saying, right? We're saying
yeah,
we have questions about a narrower charter.
I'll figure out how to phrase it.
I mean, I think that's what we're trying to do is narrow the charter and put deref stuff explicitly out of scope and figure out, is that still interesting? Okay. Seems like charter working as designed to me, but
Cool.
okay. Try trade version 2. I think all I wanted to do on this, if I'm not mistaken, Scott, you pushed some updates. I haven't looked. People
Yep.
should look. Is there anything else to say?
Anecdotally, the people have said that it's much easier to follow this time, so please give it a look. I think we just never unnominated it after last time, so I removed the tag.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing, but I figured it was worth, since you did have updates, worth calling attention to them. Visibility scoping rules for macro rules, macros. I don't think there's anything new to say here. I still have an action item I haven't quite followed up on. The one main thing is, which is to put this in our project tracking. The main thing is to figure out if this is going to happen for 2021 edition and what migration is needed. And that's something to do offline, not during the meeting.
By the way, the nominated label for the last one was added by the libs team. It's marked as both libs and language.
Oh dear.
So,
We need multiple nomination labels, don't we?
Yeah,
We should
so,
just have T-Lang nominated.
I'm putting it
and
back for our meeting tomorrow, but
Thank you. Sorry about that.
we should maybe split the labels at some point. Yeah.
I think we should just have
sorry.
per team labels. This is a perennial topic. We'll talk about it later. Okay. What's this? Mark 2203. Oh, I just merged this. But
Oh, sorry, I missed that Ashley added the nominated there. My bad.
so Scott, this was you. I just merged it because it seemed uncontroversial, but do you want to explain what this is about? Who wrote this?
Yeah, the point here is the const people decided that trying to say, oh, but it's copy in an array repeat expression got overly complicated to figuring out the nuances, especially for one link things around, or zero link things around when drop runs, when it's like what side effects it's calling for different things. So they've actually closed out the tracking issue for doing additional work on this RFC with a note saying, hey, this will just be inline consts. Once inline const exists, I just wanted to bring it up here to say, because I don't know that we ever had a Lang team like talk about it and say, yes, this makes sense. So if anyone had complaints, I wanted to say, hey, FYI.
I don't have complaints, but maybe someone else does. Okay. So nominated issues. The OR pattern issue remains nominated. I think we can just unnominate this, right? I think it's only nominated because we were planning to stabilize it, and we are doing that now. So I'm just going to remove that.
There's an item further down for stabilize.
Is there not still a set of checkboxes happening somewhere?
There is, but not on this issue. We'll get to it. Okay. Unused borrows is part of, what is this again? This has got checkboxes. It's been merged. CreatorBot's happy. What was going on? Oh, right. We're asking questions. We don't have answers yet. That's all. We asked Ecstatic Moors for some questions about pin project and why it was getting warnings. So we'll just keep it nominated for now until we get an answer.
Should we actually denominate and then tell whoever to renominate when there's an answer? That seems productive.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Actually, I think there's something else going on with this one. So this was 76894 was blocked on a concern, and that concern was actually attempted to be resolved 5 days ago. But I think that RFC bot may have a bug where once someone has been dropped from the team, they can't resolve their own concern.
So that's another, I'll fix that. I'll just do that right now. But we still have some unanswered questions, right? We're on pin project.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that the questions are not valid. I'm just observing that I think the reason the FCP hasn't gone forward is due to the concern not actually correctly being resolved. So if there are questions that we consider to be blocking for the FCP, then someone should register those questions as a concern, because otherwise, as soon as this properly gets handled, it's going to go forward with FCP.
Got it.
So
All right.
do we consider those questions to be blocking?
I feel like it blocks not our yeah, kind of. I'll ask them as concerns.
Sounds good.
Okay, so moving further down. I'm just doing that now, but you could put that as an action item for me, Mark, to register concerns and adjust the nominated label. And then I'll finish it up. So stabilize OR patterns. We have pending FCP for stabilizing OR patterns, but Scott raised a question about the precedence of OR patterns. In particular, this, I think, was accepted in the code as it was described, which seems not great to my eyes, at least, because I would expect this colon to bind tighter than the OR pattern. I think that was just removed from the code, or I think we should if it wasn't. But
yeah, I was pondering various things here, like the let doesn't seem like it needs its parentheses around the pattern if it doesn't have a type ascription, but I don't know what we want to do with all this.
I personally think we should just require parentheses in the let, and then this seems like a niche thing, and honestly, it's a little hard for my eyes to parse either way. And if we wind up adjusting the grammar to remove the make them unnecessary later, then so be it.
So basically asked to make let exactly the same as in function headers.
Yeah.
So we do currently require parentheses for this case in function headers.
Yes.
Oh, good.
And in that case, we already have a grammatical production for this. That seems appropriate.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely certain where that requirement came from, but it is apparently in the RFC. We talked about it for closures as definitely we want that.
Yeah, it's strange to have it that we left it open for closures, but not for regular functions, but okay. I mean, I think for the same reason I would want it in regular functions. Like,
I mean, the closure issue is that the syntax for OR patterns is confusing against the syntax for closures, right? Because they're both using the vertical pipe.
Yes, that just seems like the closure is even more concerning.
It's extra confusing.
But that's the one we left undone. Anyway, this is kind of I'm just writing up my assertion. This is my assertion. I personally find it I'd prefer to see the parentheses. Maybe I'm just doing Strips rule or whatever, but the thing I'm unfamiliar with, I don't mind a couple extra parens.
I mean, should we actually say that we want them in closures too? So far, what we have written here doesn't say that.
It's already required for closures.
Okay, so we'll just say
I misunderstood the conversation.
We should say it here. We know it's the consensus. Parens required in function headers, lets, and closures. Basically, any place that we have an irrefutable binding.
Hang on. Please don't let make me read a line of code that's just a bunch of pipes.
Hang on. I'm curious what the motivation is for having them in the case of a let without a type included. With the optional type, I totally agree that parenthesizing makes sense. But if you don't have the type, then I think the example shown here for let OK or error equal expr really doesn't need parentheses. It doesn't feel like the equal has the wrong binding level.
My reason is twofold. One, implementation wise, it's a lot easier. And two, I do feel it needs the binding line. Like it has the same sort of ambiguous clustering to my eye where I'm accustomed to operators like or having really low precedence.
Yeah,
And,
plus one that the aesthetics of that are bad.
And it's not as bad as the colon, because the colon like is written adjacent to the error. It really looks like it belongs to the error, but it's still ambiguous to me. And it's also also a backwards compatibility. Like my other argument is we can take it away later if we want, but.
Sure, having this as a temporary limitation, I mean, I'm happy to go along with that for the moment. Chalk me up to, I would be really sad if this remained the final syntax and we didn't lift that limitation eventually. In particular, in cases where we have things like if let chaining, I would very much not like to have that extra parenthesis everywhere.
I would be open to rediscussing when we have a more convincing use case. In other words, if we have like if let chaining and you want to show me something that looks terrible, that would probably persuade me more than this example does. Yeah, thanks. Get this specific. How's that, Josh? Good enough?
Yeah.
All right. So moving on.
So we need
to
assign
action item?
someone to make a thing.
Someone should put a comment. Who wants to write the comment? Scott. I'm putting everything on Scott, but you are the one who was on this issue. Are you game?
Sure. Okay. So the conclusion is what the conclusion listed there is, but which is basically just use the parens version for lets too.
Yes.
Correct?
Yep. Okay, cool. Mark, you got that, I hope.
Yep.
So never is the only type that is unsafe to raw point or deref into a blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so we've been over this a few times. There's, we've kind of got this specific sub-instance about unsafe checking not doing what we expect. LaSol Artichoke is working on that. We're gonna talk together later on. There is still a little bit of unclarity here about whether let underscore equals star foo is meant to be UB. I kind of think we can just remove the nomination on this issue. Like there's nothing super urgent once we solve the unsafe.
Yeah, can we punt on it?
I think so, but I wanted to make sure no one else felt otherwise.
I guess that is to say that it's UB right now because we're refusing to specify whether it's the behavior is defined.
Yeah.
But whether or not we
marked
intend
unsafe.
to be UB in the future,
Right.
Who knows?
That's how I would be happy with that conclusion for the time being. It doesn't feel like the most urgent problem.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Let UCG figure it out over time.
I'll take the action item to record that conclusion.
I mean, it's a little weird. Well, I don't know. Delegate, just saying, we're delegating UCG here when we don't require the unsafe block yet is the hard part. But are
No,
you
that's
saying
the next
no?
book.
Assuming, okay, I know. I'm just saying, are we assuming that an unsafe block is going to be required there, perhaps with a bridge compatibility warning, or is that's totally orthogonal from this conversation?
I am assuming it will be.
Okay, then I'm fine with deferring to UCG if that's the case.
So it's not really exactly defer. Yeah, I guess it's deferring to UCG, but it's basically, we're not like actively doing it. We're saying we want unsafe to be required. That's Rust number 80059. And it is considered UB for now until we make up our minds, right?
And in some related cases like match star foo, it might be actually unsound because we actually we force a discriminant read and things like that, right? I guess you
Match
should
does
just ignore
have
that.
a,
'Cause we shouldn't talk about it. Sorry.
Yeah, trying to remember. I think Match has a special rule.
I think this is a very particular special case.
I think we
is-
should not.
Sorry, we shouldn't talk about it right
Let's
now.
not talk
I
about
shouldn't
it.
have brought it up.
There's a special rule I remember, but yeah, we're not going to go into it. All right. We don't need to talk about this because we just did, but there's no real action item here. We can probably just unnominate. Okay, don't gratuitously error on tests returning result with lifetime. So let's see. This is a weird one. Let me copy and paste in what happened.
That's quite an intro.
I know.
I did miss you, Zach M. Davis. I guess I'll just click through because I don't like. Ooh, that's the wrong one. No, wrong one. This one. Why? There it is. I think we just. What does anyone? We basically had some arbitrary condition about functions that just disallowed named lifetimes in test. I think that gets lifted in this PR, which means that you can, if you scroll down, write things like this, and that's okay. I don't really have a problem with it, I guess. I'd be happy to take the action item to review it and either R+ it or bring it back if I do have a concern, or deliver someone else the action item. But,
Sorry, I think I'm not quite following. So this is, you want to annotate a test method, but the test method is generic on lifetimes for some reason?
it's currently disallowed. This PR makes it allowed. I'm not really sure why.
Why do we want this?
It's not very well motivated, just to have fewer rules, I guess.
I guess
I like rules.
things also work when they're not static.
What did you say, Mara?
I guess that in this way you can test that things also work if some lifetime is not static.
Because it's going to get it from the context that it's, but it's not, well, but it's, well,
So
I don't know what the context is.
The actual change here is we used to error if you have any generic parameters, and now we error unless they're all lifetimes. Actually, I find that less elegant. That's kind of weird and arbitrary. I'd rather we have.
Yeah.
I thought we had a restriction that tests can only return things that like impl termination, and that.
Well, that is true. Yes.
So
also true.
That's a separate issue. Like these things do impl termination, but the test itself, the test method is generic.
I think we should decline this PR.
Yeah, I don't think we should do this.
Yeah.
I don't. I
It
also
seems
can't figure out
Good to see you,
why
Zach,
you
but
want to return a result with indicates
So why don't we?
Like.
Yeah. So why don't we ask for more motivation? My opinion is we should, whenever possible, try to make rules that do not take into account what kind of generic parameter it is, but work across all kinds of generic parameters. So this violates that intuition for no
Well,
real
and it seems
reason.
like it's specifically like uncovered generic parameters, right? Like this is specifically lifetimes that don't have a bound, or where they can all be replaced with tick static or something.
Right.
Like
That's not enforced in the code, but that just falls out from the termination trait, basically. Like there's nothing in the code that takes that into account. It's just that if you were, you can't, everything you return must be static, because where else did it come from?
I have a silly question. Is the test
why
attribute
is it
lang?
generic? Oh, sorry, Scott.
What?
Is the test attribute lang?
I think so. Why wouldn't it be?
Like dev tools or
Yeah,
I mean, at that point, like, is derived lang anymore? Like, yeah, this is,
it's in a weird space, but
we're in, yeah.
yeah.
I wouldn't object if somebody else claimed it, but I don't think it's out of our purview either.
Yeah,
That's where it comes
it's ours
to.
if no one else complains.
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's ask for the motivation. Who wants to take that?
I can take that action item.
Okay, great. Moving on. This PR. Yeah, let's see if we can get these done in 5 minutes because I want to talk a little bit about addition stuff. This PR allows you to put repr, like it says. It lets you put an alignment on the function. This translates to an LLVM attribute, which I assume affects code generation and where the function gets linked.
So cool.
It is, there is no feature gate, but yeah,
It seems obvious enough.
it seems okay to me. I would probably want a feature gate just because.
LCNR also said that it should land unstable.
Yeah, it just seems
Yeah,
correct.
I actually already just commented on this one saying that it seemed reasonable on an unstable basis with the feature gate.
Can I, not to push back too hard, but do y'all expect that, like, by having this available unstable, that we'll get like a lot more information about the usage of this feature, or like we'll learn something that we wouldn't know already?
No, yes.
Like,
Less
do
so
people
that
get
we
like often nightly to use this and then be like, oh, this is a really useful feature, or oh, here's a piece of feedback on the feature that we would like adapt to?
It might happen.
So I suspect that the feedback would be a little sparse. We might get a little bit. My bigger concern would be if this gratuitously breaks something or introduces an incompatibility. We should find that out on nightly before finding it out on stable. For example,
Yeah, I guess I'm just expressing a little bit of skepticism that we would actually figure that out by having a nightly only period for this feature, but I'm fine with it. It's what we do, so go for it.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. I don't see the harm, and if we broke people because we decided to cut corners, I'd feel stupid.
Yeah, good call.
That's my argument.
All right, I'll accept it.
So
Good Lang team Senate. Avoid feeling stupid.
yeah, it's like don't do stupid shit, right? That was the Obama.
Do we need Josh to take an action item to say that was consensus in his comment?
Yeah, I think we do. The other thing is, the other part of the action item, Josh, is we should make a tracking issue. And add it to some board that I'm going to make at some point soon. So support forwarding caller location. So I didn't look too closely at this PR, but from what I can tell, what it does is, so track caller, you recall it lets unwrap give you good line numbers. It works by extending the ABI to pass down some information or something. Is that what it does? I'm trying to remember now. But it doesn't work through virtual dispatch because we sort of had to know before that we had to be able to figure out the callee to know if it was a track caller function. What this allows you to do is to put track caller on a trait that gets inherited down, inherited down to the all the impls for that trait basically, so that dyn trait values kind of always have this shim. I think there's an extra shim or something like that. I didn't look too closely at the implementation details, but that's what it does.
Presumably, if you have track caller on the trait, you always have it on, sorry, in this position is inherited by impls of the trait. So all implementations, so even when you're not going through the V table, if you were calling the method
Yes.
that had track caller in the trait definition, it will still have track caller behavior. That kind of makes me wonder if we should require you to specify track caller on the impl if it was present on the trait definition. Yeah,
I think before we went forward with this, one thing I would want is a real write-up. Like it doesn't, there's some ambiguity here about whether or not it's required, for example. But I agree with you that it would be nice to have it in both places so that you know what's happening.
Does track caller require using the Rust, only on Rust calls? What do you call it, the ABI or the calling convention? Or does it work for everything? I'm scanning the RFC now. I don't know if that matters here or not.
It's always optional, so if I recall, it's kind of a hint. So
Are you asking like if you declare like an extern like C function or something?
Yeah,
and then
yeah, that's what I'm asking.
That's a good question. It seems orthogonal to whether you have it in a trait though, because I don't think you can specify. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna get myself in trouble here. I don't know. Can you specify a non-Rust EBI for?
I think you can. I'm not sure if you can specify arbitrary ABIs. You can certainly do Rust call.
Yeah,
but can you explore some of these questions.
Can you specify that a trait method has C calling convention? Because that seems weird.
I think you can.
Not that.
I'm testing right now. You can.
Okay. Okay.
I don't see why that's weird. It's fine.
Oh, it's just unintuitive what that does, especially when combined with the track caller.
Well, that's no different. That's no different than track caller and any other external C function, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's why I was saying it seemed orthogonal to me, and that I was asking about the trait behavior here because this is specifically considering the usage in traits.
Anyway,
I don't know.
I agree it's orthogonal, so let's stop talking about it.
Okay, sorry.
Does something. We'll just let this problem keep exploding. Okay.
It's no problem.
I know, we just don't know.
The real problem is I can't remember how track caller is implemented. I have to go reread the Rust CDEF guide or something. I know it was written up somewhere because I think in the reference. Should we just ask for a write-up and move on?
Yeah.
Yeah, this seems reasonable as long as all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed for the setup.
Yeah.
Can I
do people have opinions on?
I nominate Kramer TJ to write it.
Do people generally have an opinion about Kramer's, about Taylor's, question about requiring it on the impulse? Do people have, bias one way or the other about that?
Yeah, that's the only question mark we've lifted up so far, isn't it?
Since Taylor gets to write the write-up, I guess Taylor gets to make the decision. Maybe.
I'm okay with that.
I mean, I would like if it's up to me, I would prefer that it exists, but I don't know.
It's up to you. You're doing the write-up.
I'm not going to stop you.
I'm going for it.
Always take it away.
Release the Kraken.
All right. Oh, we're going a little slower than I wanted. Let's do this last thing. Allow casting mute array ref to mute pointer. So I guess we currently allow you to cast to a const, but not a mute for some reason. And this changes that. That seems to make sense to me, but does this trigger any alarm bells for anybody?
Seems pretty weird that you couldn't do it.
Exactly.
It seems reasonable. The only potential issue would be if people ever expect this to produce like something involving the fat pointer rather than just the thin pointer.
Why is that? First of all, I think it is a fat pointer, but I'm not sure why that's an issue. You can have raw fat pointers in particular.
I don't think it's a fat pointer because it's not.
This code does compile today. This is a slice. Oh, I see. Starconst T. I'm sorry. You're right. It's not a slice. My mistake.
Yeah, I don't think there's any unsized stuff going on here.
No, I misread it. My mistake. I just saw the absence of a semicolon. No, it doesn't compile today. I don't have a problem with it compiling. I assume it gets a pointer to the first thing in the array.
Also, isn't this covered under its transitive thing of a conversion that we already allow?
Yeah. So I think we should say land it. And then move on to this other thing.
Who's the assignee?
You can put me. Okay, so I wanted to bring up some addition stuff. I didn't find all the things nominated, probably because I never got around to nominating all of them. But we are trying to assemble a list of like the addition, let me get this document, the addition items that might go into a 2021 edition. And they have to kind of meet certain criteria by certain times, and there's a bunch of random issues that were opened at various points in time to like consider doing X, Y, or Z when we are doing a 2021 edition. So I wanted to call them out and say, if people want these to happen, somebody needs to like step up and make it happen. So there's two categories. The first one is the idiom lints, and Ryan wants to push those forward and make PRs for them, as we've discussed in the past. But the other category is these kind of things like deprecate, remove, static, mute. Let me push this. This is obviously this is a Google spreadsheet, but let me put the link in the
Thank you.
meeting agenda. Just realized I didn't do that. I'll put it at the bottom here. And so forth. So let's see. Addition spreadsheet. I put it in the HackMD if people want it. So there's, yeah, I didn't look too closely at them, but we don't have to talk in too much detail now, although we have a few minutes. But mostly I wanted to say people should ping me if they're interested.
Your
in taking some
HackMD
of
link
these
is
forward.
not correct, sorry.
Oh, you're right, it is not correct. Now it is. Now it is. Okay.
Separately, in the edition nomination section, this consider deprecating weird nesting of items thing, I feel like that is interesting and complicated enough that it needs an RFC, given that it basically needs like a sort of inter-crate or intra-crate coherence check, which is like.
So my opinion is probably all of these are out of scope. I haven't looked too closely, but if we haven't even started thinking about it, unless it's really easy, I kind of don't see the point. Is my opinion, but I wanted to give people time to raise it. I think you're right that this one in particular this one is definitely heavier than the others.
Yeah, I mean, in addition, later this year, I think that's pretty clearly like, unless someone's writing an RFC right now, that's gonna fall behind.
We brought the string stuff earlier about the hypothetical zero capacity string feature, and I don't see any of these being related to that. Is there anyone who's actually still working on that in any sense, evaluating how we could do that?
Not that I know of.
That can't really be an addition thing though, right?
Yeah, that's not addition related particularly. Because it's a list feature, right?
Well, I was assuming that you would kill the APIs that are making it hard or impossible. I guess it's a libs issue.
Can't really do that.
Yeah, I don't think that's the thing.
All right.
Because the library, the only library that I know of that makes it quote unquote like impossible today is like a third-party crate that assumes that string is DRF pure, basically, and we could just break that crate if we wanted to, because we never promised that, but it's a reasonable thing to expect. Anyway, we don't have to go back into that conversation again.
That's fine. I took over randomly instead of asking Scott to do it, but I'm taking some notes that weird nesting of items is out of scope for the 2021 edition because too complicated. Somebody messaged me about this. This is what change that I would love to make, except I don't know what it is. So specifically, this is about the fact that temporaries in the tail of a block are scoped as if wherever the block is, like they get dropped in the outer context and not at the end of the block. And that's sometimes what you want and a lot of times not, and it leads to some confusing errors.
Oh, this is the sometimes you have to put a semicolon after your
Yeah,
loop.
yeah, exactly. I'd love to change it. I kind of don't see it happening for this edition for the same reason that like, it just seems like it's going to give there's just going to be a lot of annoying things to consider. Who has the bandwidth for that?
Don't you have blog posts that like, spell out why the rules are the way they are? I cover like, or at least a blog post that did that, or am I misremembering?
I do.
Ethic.
I do
maybe
have
it
a
doesn't
blog
cover this
post.
case.
It did cover this case, but it was, yeah. I mean, my motivation was not very strong though, I don't think. It was basically that you want X and block with X to be the same, but I'm not sure that's actually true. That's what I thought. I definitely think X and parenthesis X should be the same, but X and block X are not the same in other contexts. So
yeah, but having like a lock at the end of a block that someone returns a reference to, like
I think the argument is maybe like you want to be able to add a block and stick some lets, and I don't know. Anyway, it's not. I don't think it's an open and shut case. I'd like to see someone explore how important this actually is, but I think it's work. So I'm.
But you think it could be done on an addition boundary?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I don't know about this, but like I generally have a lot of icky feelings around temporary lifetimes and don't feel like they're well understood, at least to my brain, and having them change across editions sounds scary, but maybe that's just, fear of the unknown.
I mean, I don't think there's any technical reason we couldn't do it. The point that it might be unwise is well taken.
I'm just saying, like, problems that would occur due to this would be confusing and hard to understand and explain, and like.
Would it be worth a simpler mental model or not, in your opinion, Taylor?
I mean, I feel like the simple mental model for temporaries already kind of flew out the window with like if let and match not matching let bindings and all that other stuff. But maybe we could work towards a simpler mental model.
I see. Baby steps aren't going to get us there. Yeah. Okay.
I think
especially like
all right, let's scratch it out.
An addition.
We're not doing it for the edition. We're not doing it for 2021 edition. What is PubType foo equals bar, and are we doing that? Oh, this is some wacky thing. What this is PubUse exports all namespaces, and this only exports the type namespace. And I don't personally have a problem with that, but I understand why people do. So
that is if you have like a macro that has the same name as the type, and when you say PubType, it doesn't re-export the macro.
Yeah, but in particular, it doesn't re-export the constructor function for tuple structs, so you can't do this.
Oh, that's kind of annoying.
So I guess the argument for why you might want it is PubUse is doing too much and PubType is doing not enough, and there's no nice way for me to get exactly what I want. This is, Petroshenkov noted that this is complicated but not impossible, I guess. I don't know. I kind of think we're not doing this unless someone really wants to step up and make it happen.
I kind of feel like we should not do this.
Yeah, good. Me too. No warning.
Can we jump to Kfu? Because I feel like that one is totally feasible and we should do it.
So for those of you who haven't followed the Zulub channel, what's been proposed is have some way, we have a way to make an identifier to make a keyword into an identifier with r hash, whatever, r hash match or something. But we don't have a way to opt into a future keyword from a future edition without opting into the whole edition. And so it's proposed we could say k hash to mean like this is a keyword, not an identifier. I think there was some backwards compatibility issue. So like around how macros work. Scott or Josh, maybe you remember the details.
So right now the tokenizer considers that one token. No, 3 tokens, and and we'd want it to be one token.
Right. So using K-hash for this would not be backward compatible. If we found something that already parses as one token in a previous edition, then we can be backward compatible all the way back. And the only thing that would require is fitting into the existing rhash syntax. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable requirement. Instead of having raw symbols, we could have raw keywords and just have something like rhash some symbol followed by a keyword.
So I'll repeat what I. Go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I was going to say, is the motivation for this that you want to use a feature that would normally only be available in the next edition, but you don't want to transition your entire library?
Or
What's
for things that are not
what's the
yet
motivation
in
for
the
K
edition?
through?
So my take on this is that it's not for when we have a new stable edition with a feature. It's for mostly for when we don't actually have a new stable edition yet. So if we decide we want to do yeet, but we haven't reserved the keyword yet, we can say we've agreed that this will be the keyword in the next edition. And on any edition that supports K-hash, you can use K-hash yeet and it will work. And then when you migrate to whatever the next edition becomes that actually has the keyword reserved, the edition cargo fix will remove the K-hash for you. Because it's my perspective on this that we don't want that people should move to a new edition to use a new feature if the feature is available. If there is a new edition with that feature, they shouldn't just be, you know, hacking in some macro to use it on a past edition, because we want people to move their code to the new edition anyway. Which is why I'm not all that concerned about finding something that lexicographically fits into 2015. I think it's fine to say, no, only in 2021 and forward can you do this, because this is only for new code that is being updated to use a new feature anyway.
Find that persuasive, assuming that we don't break a lot of things in the process, but we're at time. I think we should take this discussion to Zulip, and we can carry it on a little bit another week. Thanks, everybody. If I can figure out how to end the meeting now, I will.
Bye.